Welcome to Black Man Folktales. Please kindly like and subscribe. Chioma's childhood was painted in the colors of struggle, dusty brown paths, faded clothes, and the constant rumbling of hunger that seemed to echo louder at night. She was born into a family that poverty had already embraced with its cruel arms, a home where her mother worked tirelessly in other people's farms to provide food, and her father, broken by years of unfulfilled promises, had almost given up on life. They lived in a cramped, mud-walled house with a rusted zinc roof that leaked whenever rain fell. Nights were the worst, the cold air seeped through cracks in the walls, and Chioma often curled herself into a ball to keep warm. Her siblings shared the same fate, but Chioma carried something different in her heart, a fierce determination that one day, she would rise above it all. When other children laughed at her torn slippers and patched dresses, she swallowed the shame and whispered to herself, "One day, I will never be looked down on again." Those words became her silent anthem, a promise etched deep in her soul that she would never settle for less than the life she believed she deserved. Despite the poverty, Chioma had a sharp mind and a certain spark that made people notice her. She was not the type to cower or wallow in self-pity. Instead, she carried herself with the pride of someone destined for more. At school, she borrowed books, sometimes copied notes late into the night under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, and yet, she still topped her class. Teachers admired her resilience, though they often wondered if it would be enough to break the chains of poverty wrapped tightly around her. Outside of school, Chioma's life was a constant reminder of her family's lack, fetching water for miles, selling firewood in the market, and sometimes going to bed with nothing but gari and water in her stomach. But through it all, she refused to bow to despair. She surrounded herself with 5 close friends, Amoka, Uche, Favor, Ngozi, and Busy. They were not rich either, but compared to Chioma, they had far more comfort. They wore newer clothes, ate better meals, and sometimes teased Chioma lightly about her condition. Yet, instead of allowing their subtle remarks to break her spirit, Chioma used them as fuel. In their midst, she vowed to herself that someday, she would rise above them all, not out of hatred, but out of a desperate need to prove to life that she was more than the poverty she was born into. What Chioma lacked in material wealth, she made up for in ambition. She dreamt of living in a mansion with gleaming floors, of wearing clothes that made people stare in awe, of riding in cars so sleek they silenced her childhood mockers. She envied no one, but she quietly studied the lifestyle of people who had what she didn't. Sometimes she would sneak glances at the rich women in town, women who strutted into the market with their gold jewelry glistening under the sun, their perfumes announcing their presence even before they spoke. Chioma would pause, clutching her firewood basket tighter, and imagine herself in their place. Her heart would burn with a mixture of longing and determination. She was certain her destiny was greater than the little village could ever offer her. And though her friends laughed, danced, and lived contentedly within their limits, Chioma carried within her an unshakable hunger for change. It was this hunger that fate noticed, and it was this same hunger that was going to lead her to cross paths with the man who. Chioma's friends, Amoka, Uche, Favor, Ngozi, and Busy, had always been her anchor during the toughest days. They shared secrets, laughed over roasted corn by the roadside, and supported each other whenever one was in need. But even within that circle, there were unspoken hierarchies. Amoka, whose parents owned a small shop, often led their outings. Uche's father was a civil servant, giving her a steady allowance. Favor was practical and hardworking, never without a plan to make extra money. Ngozi had a flair for fashion, always looking put together. And Busy, the calmest, kept the group in harmony. Chioma, on the other hand, was the poorest. Though they never excluded her, she sometimes felt the subtle difference in how they lived compared to her. She wore their hand-me-downs, joined outings without money, and contributed the least when bills came. Yet, she was loved for her boldness and wit, and the girls never truly let her feel alone. Despite their closeness, Chioma sometimes struggled with the shame of her position. She hated being the one they pitied, the one they secretly considered the weakest. But her determination to rise gave her an edge. They all admired her grit. On evenings when they gathered to talk about their dreams, Chioma's visions were the biggest. While others spoke of running small businesses or traveling abroad someday, Chioma declared boldly that she would marry rich, live in luxury, and never taste poverty again. Her friends laughed, sometimes playfully mocking her ambition, but deep down, they wondered if her confidence was more than wishful thinking. They never imagined her words would come true sooner than they thought. The turning point came one hot afternoon when Chioma went to help her mother sell firewood in town. She stood by the roadside, her wrapper stained with dust, calling out to buyers when a sleek black car pulled up nearby. Out stepped Mike, a young man with an aura that drew stares immediately. He looked like he didn't belong in their dusty town. His suit was sharp, his wristwatch glittered, and his voice carried the calm assurance of someone who had never known lack. When his eyes met Chioma's, something shifted. He didn't see the dust on her wrapper or the roughness of her hands, he saw the fire in her eyes. That day marked the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined. Mike found himself strangely drawn to Chioma. Unlike the women he usually met, polished, refined, and desperate to impress, Chioma was raw and unpretentious. She spoke her mind with a confidence that surprised him, and when he offered to buy her entire stack of firewood, she refused at first, insisting he pay only for what he needed. That integrity touched him. He returned the next day, and the next, until conversations turned into friendship, and friendship into something deeper. Chioma, though wary at first, found herself softening. Mike was unlike any man she had known, gentle, respectful, and humble despite his wealth. He asked about her life, listened without judgment, and encouraged her dreams. For the first time, she felt truly seen. Their romance was a shock to her friends. When Chioma introduced Mike to them, they were speechless. Some thought she was exaggerating until they saw him, his expensive car, his calm demeanor, his attention fixed solely on Chioma. Amoka and Uche exchanged knowing glances. Busy smiled quietly, while Ngozi and Favor whispered doubts. Was he serious, or was this just a fling with the poor girl from the village? But as weeks turned into months, Mike proved them wrong. He courted Chioma openly, visiting her family, winning her parents over, and ignoring the whispers of those who said he was too good for her. The proposal came in the most unexpected way. Mike arranged a small gathering, nothing extravagant, just Chioma, her friends, and her family. He went down on one knee, presenting a diamond ring that sparkled brighter than anything Chioma had ever seen. Tears welled in her eyes as she said yes, her heart racing with disbelief and joy. In that moment, she felt her vow to escape poverty had finally come true. She was no longer the poor girl mocked for her patched clothes, she was the chosen bride of a billionaire. Chioma's wedding to Mike was nothing short of a spectacle. The entire town buzzed with excitement, even people who barely knew her claimed her as their own. Invitations were gold embossed, the venue adorned with flowers imported from abroad, and guests arrived in fleets of luxury cars. For Chioma, walking down the aisle in a designer gown worth more than her father's entire lifetime earnings was surreal. Cameras flashed, guests whispered in awe, and her friends, dressed in matching outfits, watched with mixed emotions. Some were genuinely happy, others silently envious, but all recognized that Chioma's life had transformed forever. The reception was even more extravagant. Champagne flowed freely, celebrities performed, and the media covered every moment. Chioma basked in the glory, smiling at her new husband and reveling in the life she had always dreamt of. Her friends sat at a reserved table, watching her with admiration but also discomfort. The gap between them and Chioma had widened overnight. They were still the same women with average lives, but Chioma had become a queen in their eyes. Even as they clapped and cheered, a silent question lingered: would wealth change her? For Chioma, the wedding was more than a union of love, it was a victory against poverty, a statement to everyone who ever mocked her. She looked at Mike not just with love but with gratitude. He was her key to the world she had always wanted. But deep within, a small seed began to sprout, an awareness of her newfound status. No longer would she be the girl begging for acceptance. She was now the billionaire's wife, and though she didn't yet realize it, that crown would soon grow heavy on her head. Married life swept Chioma into a world she had only dreamed of. The mansion she now called home had marble floors that glistened under golden chandeliers, and closets filled with clothes she once only saw in magazines. Luxury cars lined their driveway, and servants answered her every call. At first, she was overwhelmed, even shy about the sudden abundance, but slowly, she began to wear her new status like a crown. She noticed how neighbors treated her differently, how old acquaintances bowed when she passed, and how vendors addressed her with exaggerated respect. What had once been her dream now became her reality, and it filled her with a sense of power. It didn't take long for Chioma's attitude to shift. When her friends came to visit the mansion for the first time, she welcomed them warmly but couldn't resist flaunting her new life. She led them from one glittering room to another, posing dramatically in front of her walk-in closet and jewelry box. "This bracelet alone cost more than what we all used to spend in a year," she said with a smile that was more boast than pride. The girls exchanged awkward glances, unsure how to respond. Amoka chuckled softly, Uche forced a smile, but Busy's eyes dimmed. They were happy for her, but the subtle digs left them unsettled. Over time, the boasting became more frequent. Chioma began to dress deliberately extravagantly whenever they met, arriving at hangouts in chauffeur-driven cars while her friends trekked or shared taxis. She interrupted conversations to mention her trips abroad, her designer bags, or Mike's latest car purchase. The easy laughter they once shared was replaced with stiff politeness. Chioma didn't notice, or perhaps, she chose not to. In her mind, she was no longer their equal, she was above them, the queen among commoners. The distance between Chioma and her friends widened with each passing week. The girls, who once called her daily and showed up at her door unannounced, began to withdraw. Calls became less frequent, and hangouts slowly fizzled out. Chioma noticed but brushed it off as jealousy. "They are not used to this kind of life," she told herself. "Of course, they'll pull away. Not everyone can handle another person's success." Instead of reaching out, she leaned further into her pride, convincing herself she had outgrown them. One afternoon, during what was supposed to be a simple brunch, Chioma crossed a line. Ngozi had excitedly announced she was starting a small boutique, her dream finally coming true. Instead of celebrating, Chioma scoffed. "A boutique? That's cute. Maybe when you grow it bigger, I'll consider shopping there. For now, I'll stick to melon." The table went silent. Favor cleared her throat. Amoka tried to change the topic, but the wound was already inflicted. That day, they realized Chioma no longer saw them as friends but as inferiors. It was the final straw for most of them. Behind her back, the group whispered their disappointment. "She's changed," Busy said softly. "The Chioma we knew is gone." Uche nodded bitterly. "Money has blinded her." Yet, even in their hurt, they pitied her. They knew pride was a dangerous crown, and one day, it would weigh her down. Chioma, however, remained oblivious. At home, Mike noticed her growing arrogance and the increasing absence of her friends. He warned her gently, reminding her where she came from, but she waved him off. "Mike, you don't understand. They are holding me back. I can't live small anymore." Little did she know her pride was planting seeds of isolation that would soon bloom into her greatest downfall. Mike loved Chioma deeply, but her transformation troubled him. He had fallen for the fiery, humble girl who carried herself with dignity despite having nothing. Now, the woman in his house seemed consumed by vanity. He often watched her scroll through her social media, posting pictures of her designer outfits, jewelry, and cars, always seeking validation. "Chioma," he said one evening as they sat in their luxurious living room, "do you remember when we first met? You had nothing, but your heart was full. That's the woman I married. Not this version of you. His voice was calm, but the disappointment in his eyes cut deep. Instead of reflecting, Chioma grew defensive. So I should apologize for enjoying the life you gave me. Is it my fault I'm blessed? If my friends can't handle my success, that's their problem, not mine. Her tone was sharp, her pride on full display. Mike sighed, rubbing his temples. He had tried reasoning with her, tried reminding her of the days when hunger was their greatest enemy, but it was like speaking to a wall. Humility makes wealth beautiful, Chioma. Without it, money is just emptiness, he said softly before walking away. Chioma rolled her eyes, convincing herself that he was simply overreacting. But the rift between them widened. Arguments became more frequent, though often subtle. Mike grew quieter, retreating into his thoughts, while Chioma grew louder, flaunting her lifestyle even more. The warmth in their marriage began to cool, replaced by unspoken tension. Deep down, Chioma feared losing her friends completely, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. She masked her loneliness with diamonds and designer gowns, never realizing that her husband was slowly losing patience, and that soon, he would hatch a plan that would shake her world to its core. Chioma's world glittered on the outside, but cracks had begun to form beneath the shine. Her friends had stopped inviting her to their meetups, and birthdays passed without their usual calls. When she scrolled through social media, she saw them together, laughing, smiling, sharing moments without her. It stung, but instead of admitting the loneliness, she told herself they were intimidated by her new status. It's not my fault they can't keep up, she muttered as she polished her diamond bracelet one evening. But late at night, when the mansion grew too quiet, she felt a hollow ache she couldn't name. Her arrogance soon spread beyond her circle of friends. Family members began to avoid her, tired of her condescending remarks and cold behavior. Even in church, where she once sat quietly at the back, she now arrived with a flourish, her clothes screaming wealth, her nose slightly tilted in disdain. People noticed, and whispers followed her. Yet Chioma didn't care. She was convinced she had earned the right to rise above everyone else. To her, humility was weakness, and respect was meant to be demanded, not earned. The isolation grew thicker, but she mistook it for admiration. Mike, however, saw clearly what was happening. His wife was building walls so high that no one could climb them. He tried again to warn her, but each attempt ended in arguments. One night, as he lay awake listening to her talk endlessly about shopping trips and new purchases, he realized something. Chioma wasn't just hurting her friends, she was hurting herself. The woman he loved was drowning in pride, and unless something drastic happened, he would lose her completely. That night, Mike decided it was time to act. Chioma's pride reached its peak when she threw a lavish dinner party for her socialite acquaintances. She deliberately excluded her old friends, thinking they would not fit in. The evening was filled with laughter, champagne, and shallow compliments, but as she sat at the head of the long dining table, she felt an emptiness creeping in. None of the women there truly knew her, they were drawn only to her wealth and Mike's name. Still, she convinced herself she was living the dream. Her crown sparkled, but it was a lonely throne she sat upon. In the days that followed, the silence of her phone grew louder. Even Amoka, who had always been the peacekeeper, stopped reaching out. Chioma told herself it didn't matter. She didn't need them anymore. Yet, every time she passed by her old hangout spots or saw photos of her friends together, a pang of longing hit her chest. She buried the feeling under new jewelry and designer gowns, but no purchase could fill the void. Her arrogance had brought her victory, but it was a hollow one. Mike watched quietly, his decision firming with each passing day. He couldn't bear to see her transform into someone so shallow. He still loved her, but he knew love wasn't enough anymore, she needed a lesson she would never forget. He began confiding in his close friend, who agreed something had to be done. Together, they brainstormed ways to humble Chioma, ways to strip her pride and remind her of her roots. It was dangerous, risky even, but Mike was desperate. For the first time, he considered deceiving the woman he loved, not to break her, but to save her from herself. Mike's plan began to take shape like a carefully crafted puzzle. He reached out to Chioma's old friends, surprising them with a private meeting. At first, they were hesitant, still nursing the wounds of her arrogance. But when Mike explained his idea, to stage a financial collapse so real it would humble Chioma, they agreed. If this will bring her back to the Chioma we knew, then we'll do it, Busy said softly. The others nodded, some with hesitation, but all understanding that Chioma's pride had to be broken before it destroyed her completely. Together, they mapped out every detail. Mike would announce that he had lost millions in a failed investment, and rumors would spread of looming bankruptcy. The bank would be portrayed as threatening to seize their mansion and cars. Chioma's friends would play their part by pretending to distance themselves further, only to return as buyers when she started selling her belongings. The plan was cruel in its execution, but necessary. Mike's only fear was whether Chioma could handle the shock or whether she would crumble beyond repair. Meanwhile, Chioma remained blissfully unaware. She strutted through boutiques, planned another extravagant outing, and posted pictures flaunting her new acquisitions. She noticed Mike had grown quieter, but she brushed it off as stress from work. "Don't worry, my love," she said one evening as she wrapped her arms around him, "we have everything we need. Nothing can touch us." Mike forced a smile, but deep inside, he knew the storm was coming. A storm that would strip away her diamonds, her arrogance, and her false throne, leaving only the raw truth of who Chioma really was. Thank you for watching Black Man Folktales. Don't forget to like and subscribe.